Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a brilliant storyteller. He's an award-winning filmmaker and poet. He was named by Forbes as one of the best storytellers of the year. His work has spanned 5 continents, been translated into 15 different languages, which I had no idea. That's pretty amazing. And described as profound, mind-expanding, and hilarious all at once. And personally, I would like to add the phrase heart expanding, because he does expand the heart. I'm a huge fan of this man's work, and I'm thrilled to have him on this podcast. Max Stossel, welcome to Glimpses.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Really, I can't say enough good things about words that move. And for those of you who are listening, I encourage you, all of you, to go online, look up Max, look up the phrase words that move, and it's his one-man show. And it is spoken word poetry, filmmaking, choreography, and animation. And in this presentation, Max addresses some of the most profound issues we face in life, but he does it with such a light, humorous touch. And the subtitle is Seeing Through a Different Eye, not E-Y-E, but capital I. Let's talk about that. Isn't that what all art does? It causes the audience, the reader, the participant to see through a different set of eyes?
Absolutely. And it's funny, the person who gave me that slogan was actually my friend Alice Frank, who is also a brilliant poet and storyteller. And it's funny to hone in on that piece, as she sees the world so much as, quite literally, that we are all one thing, looking through many different eyes or eyes.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that all great art and great human experience is just a matter of peering out through many different eyes.
Well, you do it so masterfully. Now, I saw an early version of this at the Cherry Lane Theater.
Yeah.
When it was sort of at a nascent stage. You were still testing material. And I saw it live. Then for me to see the actual filmed presentation and to see how you've expanded it and how it's grown, what was that? How long did that process take?
It took about 2 years to really develop and create. And it honestly, just seeing the enthusiasm in your eyes as you describe it lights me up and warms my heart, as this piece really has been such an undertaking of love and means so much to me. And I have always, with poetry, I would write it and then I'd perform it. And I love the live performance. You can feel the words in the room land. It feels so good. And then when people would say, "Can you send me that poem?" I would write it out and then be like, something is not quite landing in just putting it in words. I missed something. And that was what led me to start making the films, of wanting the essence of the message to travel through the screen. And that took more production, storytelling, more work. And I had done that with individual poems, but then this show that meant so much to me, of the 9 pieces put together and told on stage, I wanted to do it with that. And that was quite an undertaking. But that was... I worked with a friend and director, Erin Richards, who has directed a couple episodes of Gotham and God Friended Me, and she's an actress, and she was instrumental in helping it all come to life. And it was just a process of how do we help each of these messages land through the screen, and it was
But it's also just simple good filmmaking. And what I admired, I mean, I knew the spoken word, having heard you live, but it's seamless. And to go from the choreography into the animation, back into the live performance, and you're doing it in an empty theater because it was at the peak of COVID, which I found fascinating. But how did you study film? How much did you storyboard this ahead of time? Did you and the director just riff? How did this come about?
I did not study film. We did not really storyboard it ahead of time. Some of them were already planned short films that we then took pieces from.
Right.
And then, one of them, the Breaking Up in the Digital Age piece, which is a piece about like just the heartbreak of going from a real, honest, open relationship to all of a sudden the only place this person existing for you is in this tiny little fake frickin' box.
Right.
We had no idea what that was going to be going into shooting it live. And then like on the day of, It was, okay, let's just shoot it with a black background. We'll add stuff later. We'll figure this out and let's go. But a lot of it really came together like that. And it's, to me, storytelling is also a process of making a message land through a screen. And I really appreciate that reflection of it being beautiful filmmaking. I think that's in part just clinging with dear heart to the story and to making sure that this really resonates and lands as we see it in the way that I birthed it with such passion. And so I don't know that much about the process of filmmaking. I know a lot about insisting that this thing appears with as much like heart and beauty as it felt like it came through when I was writing it. And that's my process.
Well, that's what I admire, because it knows what it wants to be. And you weren't trying to be 3, 4, 5 different things. It's very specific. Your intent is so clear. The message is so clear. And as you can tell, I was genuinely moved.
I really appreciate it.
I think anyone that clicks on words that move, I defy you not to feel something very profound and deep, because it really stirs the heart. It triggers thoughts. It stirs emotions. And I thought, well, of course, that's what all art is supposed to do, right?
Thank you. Yeah, it means a lot. And it was a disheartening process of trying to find like a streaming home for it.
Right.
And I hear people saying things like this. I'm like, yes, this exact thing. Doesn't the world need more of this from an artistic standpoint? And I was disheartened to find like I figured I'm gonna make something awesome. It's gonna be awesome. People will want it. They'll want it. They'll take it. They'll buy it. It'll be great. I found that is not exactly how the process of selling something works, which was challenging for me. I was like, isn't this like so much more poignant than so much of the crap that I'm watching? And like, it's not the best thing ever made, but it's so much. It just belongs in a home that's going to honor it. And I ended up just saying, you know what? I'm just going to put it out myself. And
I'm glad you did.
I'm glad I did.
You're going to get a big audience. And I also want to talk about your creativity, because I love the fact that you use the phrase, you get hit with words. And you're talking about crossing the street or standing at a stoplight, and you get hit with words and they just start coming through you. Talk about that process. What does it feel like to get hit by a word?
I usually will become aware of it with like chills in some form. So whether it's arm hairs on my arms or on my neck, just like, it's happening. Something's happening now. It's time to really pay attention. That means pull out the notepad and start writing.
And is it a notepad or is it your phone?
I use my phone. And then I remember the first time it was really happening to me that way was with Subway Love, which is the last poem in the show.
Which is beautiful, by the way.
I love that one too.
It's
Thank you for
beautiful.
that. And I just remember being so amazed at each line, at being like, wow, this, then that. It just really did not feel like I was crafting. You know, sometimes I sit down and I write, and then I'm doing it. I, Max, am doing it.
Right.
When the words hit, that doesn't feel like what's happening. It's look at the words coming through. I'm just taking notation. And like as it comes, and Max's experience is awe and amazement as I'm watching the notation and reading the notation, or as it's coming through. And that's a different experience. And to me, where the most meaningful art and poetry and beauty has come from. And often the question I think people ask, from those who both have experienced this and haven't, is how do we make that happen more? How can we get in that state more often?
Right.
And it's possible that I just haven't found the ways, but I kind of have a hunch that we're not in charge of it. That like,
I think you're right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I believe it.
And when it starts and you sit down, I've even been to the point where I don't want to get up and get a drink of water or go to the restroom because
don't want to do anything to interrupt the possibility.
I don't want the
of
flow
this.
to stop.
No,
Right?
just please keep happening. Just please keep happening.
And then you come back later and you go, oh my, I have no idea where this came from.
Right. And
right?
And then you find new layers and depths of it as you read it again, where it's like, oh, and that too. Oh, wow. And that's the greatest gift creatively for me.
My friend Adriana Trigiani, who did the very first podcast I ever did, she's best-selling author, has sold a gazillion books. And she talks about tapping in, and you can't force it. You think, oh, if I wear the same sweater, if I sit in the same chair, or maybe I drink the same green juice, it'll come. It just comes when it comes.
Yeah.
And you just got to be open enough to allow it.
I'm curious how so I'm around communities of people who are so insistent on trying to find the technique. What is the technique of how do we find and make it happen again? And I'll sell you a course for $9.99 at which you can go. It's just, there's so much of that, which to me, and like, I think in part is frustrating for me because a part of me is like, oh, you can? Like, I can get this more? Yes, like, show me. And I've never, in my experience, actually found any of that for me as the way of tapping into that force, as opposed to just living my life, following curiosity, trying to be open and honoring it if it feels like it's starting to happen. And there have also been times where I felt like it's starting to happen, but then like I missed it or it didn't quite land or things like that.
And then once it happens, once you get hit and you get the initial wave of words down,
Yeah.
then do you find you do a lot of rewriting, or is it tweaking? Is it just cutting? Is it?
I have to be so absolutely certain that something needs to change for me to touch that. Like,
Okay.
I have the attitude of, who the fuck am I to edit that? Like, who the fuck is Max to edit this thing that just came through? Like, Max didn't really write this, and now Max, with Max's limitations, wants to edit this perfect thing that just happened? No, absolutely not. But so what I have found, though, is it's rare that an ending happens. With that, for me, I don't know if that's been your experience. I often find I have to make the ending.
Yes.
As my experience of that place is also like there are no endings in that infinite creative space. And so
Right.
we want our stories to have endings. So I do find sometimes like it's 75% of a piece that comes through and I have to finish it.
Yes.
But it's really rare that I'll edit that, like, the pure, if it's in that pure flow place. Because
Now-
there's different I don't know if you relate to this, there's different iterations of it. Like, there's the ones that I'm talking about right now where it's just pure dictation and, oh my God, it's happening. And then there's other times where I just feel really in flow and connected and like, oh, I like what's happening and this, like, this is good. And I maybe don't understand exactly this, but it'll make sense later. Those I'll edit. But in the notation ones, I'm like, who am I to touch this?
Yeah, I use the phrase when it's flowing like that, it's you are following the writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have had the experience, I'm sure you have, where things come down and it's almost like somebody's dropping pieces from a puzzle. I don't know how they're going to fit together. I'm just trying to get all the pieces down. And then it may take 2 weeks, a month to, oh, that's how they fit together. That's what
so
this
interesting.
was.
So also, and you've been writing more longer form. Like,
Yes.
So each of the things I've written were basically like 3 to 7 minutes complete, and then I stitched them together after.
Right.
But so that's interesting that it happens for you that way with a longer piece, where it's like I'm just getting the puzzle pieces, and then the work is stitching them together. That makes sense to me. Because yeah, for me, it's usually like one piece at a time that is coming through, and I don't have as much of like the stitching it together, unless I guess the process of creating the show is stitching it together, which is, I'm in that process right now of writing the next live show, which has been hard to figure out what exactly does that look like to stitch it together live.
Well, also, I think you don't want to start controlling it too early. Having worked in television for so many years, where you're taping on Friday, you got to have it done.
Yeah.
Up.
Yeah.
Just allow and go, you know what? I don't quite know what this is. It's kind of sloppy right now. When I was talking to my daughter Matisse about the creative process, sometimes you go into this dark place and you're stirring stuff up and you have no idea what it is. Don't judge it. Don't try and control it. Allow it to be sloppy and trust that eventually whatever meaning is shining underneath all of that is going to pop through. So
It's really interesting to try and find the place of sharing with it too, because one could argue that sharing it in that sloppiness is its own form of beauty, of just like,
Yep.
I don't know what any of this means yet. This is gross and messy and weird and here. And a lot of art certainly feels like that. And then I also really like when I feel like I can find the thing that I can proudly like lift up above my head and say, here, like, I found something. I want you to have it. I want you to see it. But there are many different forms of how to share and express that and bring it all on, right? Of each to each their own, and it's all beautiful. And I'm totally with you on not judging it is a critical piece.
yeah, because I've often talked about this, that doubt is a writer's constant companion. That little demon that sits here and whispers in your ear. You just have to bat it away. I want to talk about Luca, your dog, because this is a perfect example from Words That Move of seeing the world, the park, other dogs through Luca's eyes. How did that come about? Did Luca just start
talking?
Start talking to you?
It's a conversation with my dog, and it was one that sort of hit me as I was walking him, and just like trying to see the world through his eyes, and then having these hilarious conversations in my head. And then it was one of those where to both walk the dog and write things down, it's just like a hands difficult type of scenario, and also not wanting in that moment to really, it was about him. Like, I didn't want to stop the dog walk to do this. Like, he was a part of this. I didn't want to like interrupt that flow of it either. So trying to both like take notes on one hand in with my phone and also let him really go wherever he felt curious or called to, because there are going to be new observations as the flow is starting to happen.
But crawling inside your pet's mind, and the correlation I made is when my children were young, to be able to see the world through their eyes as a 3-year-old and discover things, and then I get to discover it with them. So but to do that through your pet's point of view, I found really original and fun, intriguing.
I love the Max, you're crazy. There's so much here to love. Just try the bottom half of this dead dove. Don't be afraid of later throwing up. It's just what happens when you experience too much. If it's not coming out, you're not eating enough. Just really felt like I also really love when we can find beauty and wisdom in places that we often societally discard as stupid or as not as smart or intelligent, when those places can be shined on of all the light and the perspective that is shown. That really moves me, and it's like one of the reasons that Forrest Gump is one of my favorite films. Of just,
one of mine.
Yeah, of that shift on what is wise really, what is beauty really.
We're in sync, because I pulled this quote. This is from Shakespeare's Henry V. And the quote is, "Wisdom cries out in the streets and no man regards it." And I realized Shakespeare borrowed that idea from the book of Proverbs, because the book of Proverbs talks about wisdom being in the street and people missing it. And the reason I pulled that, because when I saw the segment about your barber, for wisdom cries out in the streets or in the barbershop, talk about your barber, because that I was completely captivated by that.
He was someone who, I just walked into the barbershop and I met him. He was running late, and he, sort of flustered, and he just kept going into sort of like these Shakespearean type sonnets that he would profess while he was cutting hair. I was like, who is this man? He's incredible. And then because he was running late, he was like talking about like there were delays in the subway. I shared subway love with him, like in the chair. And he was just like, art moves his soul so much. And so he was just so touched. And that was the beginning of our friendship. He's become a very close friend.
And does he indeed have these various degrees you talked about?
Oh, yeah. This is all true. This is all 100% true.
Would you mind sharing?
He has a degree in divinity, cosmetology, and in theater. And it really is true that like one of his reasons, like cutting hair is his vehicle for delivering like messages and being a minister.
Yeah.
And that's he's gay, and he was on the path to being a minister as a gay man. That didn't quite feel right for him, and this is his vehicle, and he really is brilliant at it. It's like his method of healing, and it's really beautiful.
I find that fascinating, because I've often thought, even someone who's bagging your groceries or whatever, there's always a spiritual exchange with people. And I know you've talked about how you're not religious, but you have to be deeply spiritual to do what you do.
This has absolutely influenced my deep belief in God and understanding of God. And there have been people in my life and art, God, love, creativity. I think they're all very similar threads that come from the same place. And I'm also, it's interesting you mentioned doubt. I was thinking, like, do I want to share a poem on this? What poem would it be? And there's one that I think actually I would like to share, and then let it be a conversation starter for us, because I'd be curious about your relationship with this, which is, I hope I remember the words, and that I'm constantly wondering if I'm good enough to pursue my art, if I'm worthy of following my heart, wondering if my wording is worthy, worried I'm not worthy of working on creating beauty. I am constantly wondering if I am creating any beauty. If there's any substance to these fleeting words, anything it's really worth, anything that changes after people hear my work. And if there's been no change as far as the I is concerned, then I'm concerned that at the end, my life's work won't have been worth anything. I'm afraid the world would be a better place if I replaced the time I spend on stage with walking out into the streets and doing literally anything. Do words matter when they don't make matter? Do ideas need to take matter to matter? Because to make matters worse, I don't want to be out there. I want to be here, sharing words that seem to so very quickly fade. My art doesn't exist in physical, tangible space. It comes and then it goes away until we're left with this. Nothingness. Emptiness. Consciousness that I so desperately want to lift, but when I look around at this, it won't look any different than when I started. Unless we're different than when I started. And we won't look any different as far as the eye is concerned, so I'm concerned that none of this matters. Then again, do we matter? Nothing but this miraculous accumulation of matter, miraculous organization of matter, seeing matter, being matter, breathing matter. We can't actually make matter, but we can make matter matter. We can turn matter into things that matter. We can give matter value. Are these words valuable? Is that measured in dollars and cents? I guess logically that would make sense, but if we were observed by aliens, they'd probably wonder why we spend so much time and money on things that don't matter. They'd be like, why don't you value value for its value? Why not create a world where value is actually built on your values? Planet Earth could be the thing you call heaven with an adjustment to your attitudes. Isn't that a beautiful idea? And isn't it something that an idea can be beautiful? And maybe that's enough. I want so badly for it to be enough, for what I create in minds, hearts, and souls to be enough. I feel like I'm hurling stones into this giant pool of consciousness, and I finish each poem with a splash. And for a moment, there's a ripple over this vast pool of thoughts that we've collectively amassed. And then it fades, as ripples do. Without a care for me or you, that stillness is resumed. And as I gaze at this beautiful, natural view, can't help but feel like it looks the same as it was before I threw. And I know the lake has my stones in it now, but if I'm being brutally honest with myself, is that change? Does that matter? And no matter how much time I spend crafting the perfect lines, it won't stop my time on this earth from its inevitable decline. Since birth, I've been slowly dying, losing an arm wrestling match with Father Time. And it might look like I have my shit together as far as the eye is concerned, but I'm concerned that I'm wasting the only thing that matters. That I'll look back from my deathbed knowing deep down it didn't matter, that I'll return to the earth, nothing but mere matter without having made any more than a ripple. At least as far as the eye is concerned. And I wrote that when dealing with my own self-doubt. And it was fun to perform right now because it feels like a very past version of myself. I have come to be so confident and grateful for the ripple effect and how we interact with each other. But yeah, I just like that you mentioned doubt, and I wanted to share that.
But what I gleaned from what you just did, which I thought was pretty brilliant, is part of creating is being humble enough, quiet enough, still enough to allow it to happen. And truly, I think humility has to come before the confidence. And now you've got the confidence because you've got your 10,000 hours in, right? But I find that the brilliance of how you lace your words together comes from such an authentic place. I don't feel you manipulating me with your words. I really feel you are sharing your heart with me through your words. And that's a big difference because I can be dazzled by words and go, oh, that was brilliant. And the person doing it knows they're being brilliant. You just feel so authentic to me that I connect with your words on a different kind of level.
Thank you for sharing that. That's one thing that felt cool in this moment was I felt really connected. It felt authentic in sharing that, which was also interesting because it's not like an argument I would make right now. Like that, I was like, oh, as I'm performing it, oh, those lines feel really in the head and not in touch with the deeper river of soul. And yet also it felt nice to tap into it and share from that moment. Anyway, I appreciate that reflection and thank you.
Well, I want to talk because I'm going to back up a little bit because you use the phrase in Words That Move, recognize the magic. Explain that to the listeners. When you talk about recognize the magic.
Yeah. It is amazing that there's anything at all. It's amazing that any of this exists, that there's wood on this table, that I have a hand that can feel wood, that I have an eye that can see wood. The wood is brown. That means there are colors. It's amazing that there are colors, the different shades and darknesses of the colors. That's amazing too. It's hard. There are some things that are not hard. I have the power to tell what is hard and what is not hard. That's amazing. Like there didn't have to be anything. And there's so much amazing that is happening all of the time. And that's one layer of it. And also just billions of people having their own experiences and lives colliding at different moments and creating spectacular different pieces of magic. it just, to me, it is magic. How could it possibly be that you and I happen to be here at this moment, that the sequence of our events in our lives led us to be here in this moment? The number of heartbreaks and pains and hurts and celebrations and children that had to be had for this to occur. Like, all of our lives led us to this moment. And it's happening, and then new things happening. That's magic. And it really is magic to me that I want. That it feels like there's so much joy in that consciousness and that way of looking at the world. And I want us to recognize that magic. I love that magic.
I'm completely in sync, because I think the marvelous fact that you and I are sitting here having this conversation on this tiny little grain of seawater, sand, and lava spinning on a spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy inside an expanding universe filled with 200 billion trillion stars. That's amazing.
It's amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
It's absolutely amazing.
All right, I'm going to shift a little bit. You are the founder and CEO of Social Awakening. And I find this fascinating because you started working in social media. Would you explain to the listeners what is Social Awakening and what is the purpose and what is your mission?
Yeah, so when I'm not writing poetry and performing it, this is the other work that I do, which is I used to work in tech. I met someone named Tristan Harris, who, if you've seen The Social Dilemma, he was the guy in that quite a lot. And I helped him start an organization called the Center for Humane Technology, which was basically former tech insiders who were concerned about the direction things were headed and wanting to create a more humane future. And we were getting all these emails from parents and teachers basically saying, what the heck do we do about this whole smartphone social media thing? And I thought, hey, maybe my perspective can be helpful for these communities. And so I've spent the past about 9 years now speaking with hundreds of thousands of students, parents, and educators about how social media is impacting their lives and relationships. And so I go in for like a day with a school, and I'll do an assembly with the students. I'll work with the teachers and faculty. I'll work with the parents in the evening, just trying to create cohesive language around managing the chaos that is how social media has just shifted so many different aspects of our lives.
And is there a core message that you try? Most of these kids are in
middle and high school.
So they're at that vulnerable stage, and that's when they get addicted to this and start comparing their lives and by the social media thing. And is there a core message that you tell them?
Most of what I am able to come in to do is, one, come not as a parent and teacher saying, you kids and your phones, to not do that.
Right.
And say like, hey, let me show you how this is designed so you can make your own decisions and make better decisions about it. And from there, we're going to start to look at, what are you doing because you want to? Like, what are you actually choosing in this digital world? And what are you just getting manipulated in, or just falling into traps, or doing it because everybody else is doing? And so I start from that place and then go to, how is this shifting the way that like we think of ourselves and our bodies and our sense of who we are in the world? How is this changing the way we talk to each other as friends, or how the way we relate romantically? And just sort of, I plant a lot of seeds and conversation starters, and also work to create resources to help kind of like work with it on a continual way. But it's a big subject, and it's very hard, and there's a lot of work to be done in creating more lasting impact. I've gotten very good at starting the conversation and planting the seed. I would like to get better at developing more like lasting resources to deal with this stuff, because I think it's a lifelong battle of how do we engage with our supercomputers in ways that actually feels good and meaningful.
Yeah, I jokingly one day said, social media, because I was off it for years, and because I've got the book coming out, I had to get on social media to promote the book. And I said, social media to me is like fire. You can cook food and feed your neighbor, or you can burn their house down with it, right? So how do you use it? What's the intent behind it? But the thing that I'm concerned about is the addiction, the fact that the dopamine and all of this, the clicking, and for young people, they really do get addicted to this, don't they?
So a helpful analogy is that something in America that makes more money than baseball, movies, and theme parks combined is slot machines. And slot machines use something called variable rewards, which is you pull a lever or you push a button, and sometimes you win, the lights flash, it feels good, and sometimes you don't, but you can't predict when you're going to get the rush. And so much of social media is designed like slot machines. Even scrolling, we're sitting there, bored, bored, bored. Whoa, that was cool. Check that out. Bored, 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 bored. That made me laugh. These sort of emotional rewards of scrolling for hours and hours on these slot machines. Also with every notification of, oh wait, like, did more people like my photo? Do I get that hit? Or did my, for these kids, did my crush see my story this time? Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. And it keeps us checking and checking in a very addictive way. I'm actually personally less concerned with the addiction and more concerned with like the mental health elements, the sense of self and body image, the just like not knowing what life is like when it's not so externally social media validated and driven. There's so many nuances and areas of it, but there's a lot to be done in that space, and my world
Are
is very
these young
busy with
people
that work.
receptive to what you're saying? Do they receive it, or do they put up a barrier?
I certainly can't boast 100% hit rate with every kid in the audience, but I think I get through to a high percentage of the people in the room, and that's why they pay me to come in there, is I'm able to get through and help them hear it. Some of which is that I'm just not their parent or teacher, and other just coming from the industry, being able to say, let's just talk about how this stuff works, and then ways that bleeds over into our lives. And the non-judgment is also really big, saying like, I'm not here to judge of how any of this is happening. Let's just look at it and what do we actually want to choose. That's a principle that I think helps me get through to kids.
Okay. Well, also you're young and you're hip. You're not an old geezer coming in there. If I go in there, they're going, "What's Grandpa saying? Check, please."
There is some of that, and it helps that I look a good 7 years younger than I am, so that helps with the kids as well.
All right, I want to talk about, because so much of what you deal with in your spoken word and in your performances are relationships, and how difficult it is to have a relationship. And I've been with Angelina now 38 years. We've been married 36 years. So I look back and I go, I'm glad I met you when I did, and I'm glad we got married when I did, and when we did. But why is it so difficult it seems in today's world for people to find, connect, and stay connected as a couple?
That's a big question.
It's a big one. I know it is.
I think, some of the places I can speak to are one within social media and online dating culture. Okay. We've never before had like just so many like superficial options in our pockets at all times. And so this is a challenge, I think, both with relationships and with life, is if we have a moment of boredom right now, we're on a podcast, so we wouldn't do it. But sometimes in conversation, people just pull out their phone, start scrolling in that moment of boredom or anxiety. It's never been easier to run away from the hard things or run away from ourselves. That's a great point. And I think in terms of, to really develop a meaningful relationship really involves working through the hard things and not just like running at the first sign of trouble or avoiding our own stuff. That relationships are the biggest mirrors for self, right? They bring up all the ways that we need to work on ourselves. And it's never been easier to run away to all the other options or possibilities, or just even run away from our feelings as we go into our devices. And so I think that's some of why it might be harder than it has been in the past. And just two different people trying to, in some ways, relationships are absurd. It's ridiculous, right? Like, people are going to live their whole lives together and all the different phases and iterations of who we are. That's a wild concept. And so it can be quite hard. And I think we are also seeing new formations of relationships start to emerge in this culture, which are interesting. And what does love look like for different people? And I'm very open to whatever that might be in different forms.
Talk just momentarily, for those that haven't seen your film, about the subway love, what's going on in the subway, the concept of that. I just thought was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. It was something I wrote waiting for the train at West 4th Street. And I think at the time, actually, I was feeling frustrated that a girl I had a crush on was not into me. And so I was kind of filled with this, like, why is it so hard to just connect and see and be seen in this city? And then just looking around, like, there's a couple hundred people that are just sitting here staring into a tunnel. Like, that's what we're doing on the train. Like, who knows what is waiting for us if we were to actually use this space and this time differently. And that was when that poem sort of flowed through and came out, which is about, can we recognize the immense amount of opportunity and magic that is in front of us all the time, which often is relational, I think. Like, it's not always, but often, if we were to just see the possibilities, just in terms of our challenges in our lives and the magic that could happen from engaging with each other in different ways, the world could be a much more beautiful place. And it was out of sort of a longing for it to be less 200 strangers staring into a tunnel and more beautifully choreographed, like, what does it look like if everybody is finding exactly what's there for them in a moment in that subway station? And maybe we'd dance, and it's a dance through the subway.
And it's beautiful. But you seem to maintain a sense of awe as you go through your day. That's what I sense. And, this is called Glimpses because the book is about finding glimpses of God. And by God, we're not talking about 10 commandments and thunderbolts. We're talking about goodness, grace, magic.
Yeah.
And you obviously, as you bang around New York, you see glimpses every day. You're channeling glimpses every day.
It's also, frankly, it's a good reminder for me to take my own medicine and look at the world that way.
Yeah.
But I think one helpful principle in that is a genuine belief that it is all happening for us. That, like, even the what seems to be unfathomably awful right now, perfect example of we have like really horrifying war that are going on, terrifying images popping up in the media.
Right.
And there is, even in the depths of pain and darkness for me, I do have a core fundamental belief that even if my human mind can't understand it, all of this is happening for us and not to us. And I think that allows me to look for things as magic more easily, and not get so caught in the despair of how could it possibly be like this. And as I say that out loud, it sounds like it's like, oh, was it a coping mechanism of handling the stuff? And for me, it's just really not. It's just really a fundamental belief that this is happening.
You
for
touched
us.
my heart again, because I believe that so deeply in my core being. Because it's easy to give into the despair, throw your hands up, and just wallow in the darkness. I feel exactly the way you do. And deep inside, on some level that I can't even begin to understand, I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah. And in some ways, we're tough messengers for this one as affluent white men.
Absolutely.
And I also, which is, like, I will happily face and speak to that, while yes, I do not face the same challenges and struggles as other people in this country or in this world, I also believe that, like, no matter the scale of these challenges and hardships, like, I do believe that this is happening for us, and, like, I really do stand in that and stand for others to help them see it when they're in it. And and it's not a message for everybody, but I really do believe it.
Well, I love your messages. So before we sign off, you're working on the next show.
Yes.
And do you have any timeline, or are you just in the middle of the process?
I would hope if you come to, I hope people will hear this and go on to watch Words That Move, and you can enter your email on that website again. And if you do that, then you'll hear about it in the different cities. But this show is about God and consciousness and and death and the different forms and iterations of that. So we're writing about similar things here. I'm very excited to share it with you when it's ready.
Well, you can put me at the top of your fan club. I'll be at the top of your list.
Thank you.
Because I'm a huge fan, and I thank you for taking the time to do this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
That's it for this podcast. Thank you for joining us on Glimpses. As you go about your day, I encourage you all to take the time to look around and catch a glimpse. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Glimpses. Speaking of, Glimpses is now available for purchase at your online retailer of choice. And the best part? Every penny earned will be going to charities who support children in need. You can get your copy in the link below. Until next time, have an amazing day.